Good afternoon. Welcome to this press conference on the strengthened code of practice on disinformation. I'm honored to welcome Věra Jourová, the Commission Vice President for Values and Democracy, and Thierry Breton, the Commissaire européen pour le marché intérieur. Both will introduce us to the topic, and then we have time for your questions. We have interpretation for you in French, Czech, and English today, and we also just published our press package, press release, a memo, and a fact check. And without further ado, I give the floor to the Vice President.
Yes, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Indeed, I am very happy to be here together with Thierry to present to you the freshly signed new anti-disinformation code. I think that this is really a powerful package of new measures which come at a time when Russia is weaponizing disinformation as part of its military aggression against Ukraine, but also when we see attacks on democracy more broadly. And it's time to act, and today we are acting. Also, when you look into the conclusions of the European Councils, the leaders always include the chapters and articles about the need to fight against disinformation. So this is a growing problem in the EU, and we really have to take stronger measures. We just finished the signing ceremony, and we have 30 signatories. This is double the number of the signatories of the old code from 2018. We not only have big platforms on board, such as Meta, TikTok, YouTube or Twitter, but also smaller ones. And we have messaging apps such as WhatsApp. We have civil society organizations, digital advertising providers and fact-checkers. And this is a big step forward because thanks to the new code, we have created an environment of collaboration with constant monitoring and potential adjustments in the wake of new threats and new evidence. Now, let me explain why this code is an important piece of the puzzle in our response to disinformation. The code is a key instrument for creating a safer and healthier online environment in the entire European Union. As consumption of news and information has moved online, so have attempts to manipulate democratic discourse and processes. Bots or fake accounts are increasingly synthetic media like deep fakes are only the tip of the iceberg. For users, it is increasingly difficult to understand who is behind a message or how credible a piece of information is. If people will lose trust in information they find online, they will ultimately lose trust in democracy altogether. And unfortunately, we are in an information disorder, or rather disinformation war. Russia's invasion on Ukraine is just the latest reminder of that. And of course, the disinformation predates Russia's invasion. We have seen it present in all important crises or events such as COVID pandemic, Brexit, or January the 6th attack on Capitol, to also mention something happening elsewhere. It is used to amplify existing divisions and to undermine our democracies. The new code is a testimony that Europe has learned its lessons and that we are not naive any longer. The code is an element of the democratic, well-calibrated response to this threat, a response with no censorship, a response that does not create any ministry of truth. Let me give you a few highlights. First, the commercial pillar. Today, simply disinformation pays off. The purveyors of disinformation make big money. The platforms make money. The advertisers make money on disinformation. The code will disrupt this financing model as it obliges the signatories to pay attention, to demonetize content that becomes viral thanks to modern tricks or that is illegal or harmful. Second is the structural pillar. Not only will we have more signatories, but they will finally have to provide meaningful data on the country level, on the language level. Highly aggregated data alone cannot help us to defend ourselves efficiently. We need to be able to react to trends in all member states based on the respective language. And I have talked with governments and civil society from many smaller countries in the EU, affected heavily by the war in Ukraine and the information war which accompanies the war. They all say the same story. Big platforms do not invest sufficient resources in different national languages. They don't provide data, they don't cooperate with local authorities and experts. And this is what we need to see changed. Yet the information space is still largely organized on the national level. Disinformation waves could be huge in Slovakia on Russia's actions and refugees, but less so in other parts. Only by having a detailed country and language level data can we understand what is happening and react accordingly. And third, the user empowerment pillar. The main reason we do this is to help the online users, the public, to have better tools to understand and control what they are seeing online. To date, we have almost no transparency of so-called recommender systems, meaning the system that decides which post or video we will see first. We pretty much have no way of controlling it as users. And we will be supported by researchers and fact-checkers who will have access to data and who will be a partner in cleaning up the space. This will change. Users will also have better tools to flag disinformation, and online platforms will have to design labeling systems and cooperate with fact-checkers and other expert organizations. There are many more pillars and elements. The new code has 44 commitments and 127 concrete measures in comparison with 21 general pledges of the old code. All of them are underpinned by transparency. There will be regular reporting, a publicly accessible transparency centre, and importantly, we have process and progress on access to data for researchers, because we need to know more, have the right diagnosis and not fight yesterday's battles. Today also marks a clear departure from self-regulation only. For the big platforms, it will be enforced through the Digital Services Act, and Thierry will talk about it in more detail. To conclude, the code is an important element of the puzzle to organise our information space and to make our societies stronger against the weapon of disinformation. But it is not the last element. We fully realise the online world is not the only place where disinformation happens. This is why we want to support and safeguard freedom and pluralism of traditional media as well. Later this year, together with Thierry, we will propose the European Media Freedom Act to promote independence of our public media, transparency of ownership of private media, and increase transparency of public spending on advertising, among others. But today we show with this new code that a safer and more transparent online ecosystem is possible, and the EU is determined to prove it. The society which forgets to value the truth is the society which is falling, and this is what we must not have in Europe. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, dear Vera, and thank you for these explanations, which are extremely clear. And if you allow me, I will switch in French. C'est un jour important.
Well, today is an important day because we're taking another step forward, as Vera said, in the fight against disinformation. I think if there's one sensitive topic at the moment, it's this one. It's sensitive, first and foremost, because of the impact it has on our everyday lives, but also the impact it has on our democracy. It's also sensitive because it impacts fundamental rights, particularly freedom of expression, but also it has an impact in terms of controls and sanctioning those people who violate our rules and laws, particularly across all spheres of our life. And obviously, for centuries we've been fighting against this. That's what's made Europe the cradle of civilization and democracy. And obviously, the current geopolitical context is important. And we must not forget that Europe is the first and biggest democratic continent on our planet, 445 million inhabitants. We are the biggest democracy in the world. It's an honour, but it also brings with it duty and obligation and responsibility. And there are many demands on us, and one of those demands is that in this area of information with Vera, we want to make sure that this duty is taken seriously. We have the different instruments, the DSA, the DMA, I'll come back to those later, but they will allow us finally to have a framework, a legislative framework, to allow us to set targets, objectives, ambitious ones for the platforms, and in particular the large platforms, to fight against everything that is done illegally, because obviously everything that is illegal offline should also be illegal online, but also it will help to give a framework for measures to be taken to respect individuals' human rights. And let me come back to something that Vera said. These instruments are part of our hybrid weapons can be used to fight the hybrid weapons that we are seeing used today. Let's not be naive. This war of information is not something which started in February 2022 by this wildcat strike by Vladimir Putin on Ukraine. It started well before then. And let's call a spade a spade. He had used this instrument, weapon already well in advance to try and divide us and to destabilise our European democracy. Now, I'll spare you all of the details and examples that show this: Brexit, vaccines, electoral campaigns within our different countries. There are many examples, unfortunately, very many examples. We know what disinformation is, and now we want to fight against it. And as we are the biggest democracy in the world, we are the first to have brought together all of the stakeholders. Everybody has an opinion on this disinformation in our area for information. Obviously, we are talking about the big platforms, but also academics, universities, NGOs, and even other organisations like Reporters Sans Frontières. They all contribute in their own way, in their sectors, in monitoring this disinformation. And disinformation is a scourge that we need to fight against. Let's not forget. They are all working to this end. So we all wanted to, and it's our role as regulators and our role as politicians representing the European Commission, we have all clearly stated our expectations. That's the role of a political power, to clearly state what expectations we have in order to protect our European citizens that we are responsible for. And all of the platforms, but all of the ecosystem, heard our statement. They've taken on board our claims, our requirements, and they have gradually implemented them in the code of conduct that's being presented today. We have now updated a step which was initially taken in 2018. Obviously, we've increased the number of signatories. I think we're at 33 today. We've doubled the number of signatories. We hope that will go up even further. This is all on a voluntary basis. That too is part and parcel of democracy. I'm not sure the same approach would be taken across other continents, but for the EU, this is very important. But we have also ensured that all our signatories can take ownership. We've had we started off with 40 commitments. We're now at 100 commitments, which we feel, together with Vera, are now moving in the right direction to help us to better control and to better take responsibility. So our signatories will be able to better control these things. Obviously, when you have a code of this nature, which is voluntary and self-regulatory, and here you can see me holding it up, it's quite a broad code, 100 commitments in there. When you have a code of this nature, you also have to ensure that those platforms, those first platforms, obviously can stick to the code, but also that they accept some kind of co-control so that we can check that they're doing what they say they're doing and that we have good governance in this sphere. But at the end of the day, as I said, we mustn't be naive, and we are not naive. We also have to, and this is the second part of my message, we have to ensure that everybody gets ready and is prepared. And the DSA will help. We've not taken anybody by surprise. We've had broad-based consultations for the DSA, more than 3,000 contributions. We've listened to everybody. We know what everybody's position is. We had lobbies. I know there were many of them. I know they were also very demanding. But Vera and I am very used to that. So we've listened to them. We didn't always grant them what they wanted, but we listened to them. We have made sure that what is now being proposed is in line with the general interest at European level, which is our driving force at the end of the day. The DSA will come into force in the first 6 months of 2021. But, of course, there are obligations contained in the DSA as well. For the big platforms as well, they will also have to fulfil new obligations, including when it comes to disinformation. The DSA will be a legal basis for the disinformation code. The DSA also has a deterrent sanctions strand as well, and that's important. Those people that will fulfil and live by the code and fulfil the obligations in the code will contribute to maintaining fundamental human rights and values in our space for information. And those that don't, it's quite right and justified, I think, that they will be sanctioned, and there's a possibility of fines of up to 6% of their world turnover as well. And if there is consistent flouting of the rules, we can also think about stopping their access to our space of information. So these are our rules. These rules are there to protect our citizens in Europe and to protect our European values, including democracy, and those rules must be abided by. Let me finish now with one other important point, and here too I'm not naive, and Vera, we've spoken about this at length as well. Many platforms use the viral nature of fake news to make money. They basically monetize fake information. That's totally unacceptable. That's still happening now, including with the war in Ukraine. But it's totally unacceptable. We've said it time and time and again. Now is the right time. Commitments are taken within the Code of Conduct. Let's hope that we see the effect of that straight away. But if that isn't the case, as soon as the DSA comes into force, we will have a means of recourse. We will be able to react. We already have teams within DG Connect today. DG Connect will be monitoring the implementation of the DSA. They'll be looking at the enforcement side of things. They will be monitoring and verifying, checking compliance, either regularly or at random intervals. They'll be looking at what's happening on the platforms, including the algorithms that are used, to ensure that never again the platforms will use algorithms or will hide behind algorithms to push content in order for them to go viral, even though it's fake news. So it's a very important moment in time. It's one stage. There'll be other stages in the process, but it's a very important milestone, I think. And personally speaking, what I'm very happy about is that this is a stage that's been built together by all of the players and actors in the ecosystem. Obviously, we've instigated it a little bit on our side, but it really is a response from industry. And I see that as a very positive sign that everybody has understood that in order to benefit from the single digital market, there are rules that need to be respected, and they will do so. Thank you.
Madame la Vice-Présidente, nous avons maintenant temps pour vos...
Thank you very much, Commissioner and Madam Vice President. Now we have time for questions. I'll begin with the room. We don't have any questions there, but now I'll go online to David Carretta.
Oui, merci.
Thank you. David Carretta, Radio Radicale, Italian radio.
If I may, because this is a code of conduct for the online world. But what we are seeing, at least in my country, Italy, is a huge disinformation campaign going on television, traditional media. We can see every day in public and private television propagandists from the Kremlin who are, by the way, sanctioned by the EU, spreading disinformation on traditional media. I'm wondering if you have any thought on that. Thank you.
David, c'est une question très importante et évidemment.
Well, it's a very important question, David, and here we're talking about the information space as well as the digital space. But you're right. We're not naive about this. You referred to Russia Today, to Sputnik, which are, as we know, which spread propaganda, war propaganda, and this is why it was decided that these two entities would be placed on the sanctions list given their behavior, in particular as concerns the war in Ukraine, started by the Kremlin. But you're right. There's disinformation in the traditional media as well. And it's also propagated by these two entities you just mentioned. And we're working with Vera on the Media Freedom Act. And within the framework of this Media Freedom Act, we're calibrating. Well, this is a very complex subject on which there are high expectations. We're calibrating this to address media in the broadest sense. We want to ensure that we have a free press that's not under the control of foreign entities, which can express itself freely. We know that there are entities which are completely controlled by a non-European government. And one whole component of the Media Freedom Act concerns interference by governments in freedom of expression with the view to providing a better framework and more control of this. So we're still working on this, David, but these are some of the points we're going to address. And we're well aware that this is a very sensitive subject. But I'd like to take this opportunity to say that behind all this, there's an effort we have to make to educate our young people, working with Vera Maria Gabriel, who's responsible for youth and education, to ensure that in school, when they're very young, our children learn how to use information, how not to take information at face value. And they need references, historical and cultural references, that will help them to make distinctions between real information and disinformation. I think Vera would like to add something. I'm sure she'll be much more brilliant than I am.
I will only add three comments. I think we dream about the society in which the people will become disgusted by being manipulated. I remember that feeling. Before 1989, I was 25, can you imagine, Thierry? We knew we were manipulated, and we were brainwashed, and we felt those days propaganda coming from Kremlin, how strong it was, but not strong enough to prevent us from listening to Voice of America or Radio Liberty, because we were hungry for the truth. And maybe our society should get into this stage, to this level that the people will say themselves, stop, we do not want that. And it's also part of this code because we don't want to see in European Union easy to manipulate crowd. We want individual citizens who will want to be well informed and make a choice. If somebody wants to believe stupidities and conspiracy theories, it's his or her choice. But I think that it's our obligation to help to enrich the information space with the facts and with the evidence which the people also want to read. It was still the first comment. I still have two, but very short ones. As Thierry spoke about the Media Freedom Act, indeed, there will be an article or chapter about the need for the media sphere, media sector, to take some self-regulatory measures to increase and keep high the professionalism and to keep the quality and trustworthiness of information. So this is what we are working on. The last comment related to war propaganda. As Thierry said, we took unprecedented measures that we are sanctioning the so-called media, which in my view are not media, Russia Today and Sputnik. These are simply Kremlin's weapons. But this is also in the hands of the member states to make an assessment whether some media pose the threat to national security, and they can also take decisions on their level and not to wait for the EU to impose new sanctions. And it was the case of the Baltic Sea countries, which on their own, based on their own assessment, are sanctioning some TV channels. I don't want to say that this is the inspiration for Italy, but I think that now when we are in the information war, all member states should do this permanent assessment whether some media do not pose this threat to the national security. It's not for the EU to decide per a member state.
Thank you very much. Next is Thomas Migliarina from Swiss Television.
Oui, bonjour, Thomas Migliarina, Télévision Suisse. Monsieur Breton, par rapport à ce que vous avez dit dans...
Mr. Breton, in terms of what you said in your introduction, do you think Brexit is a product of Putin's disinformation? And Madame Jourová, not all of the countries that have signed up to the European sanctions have decided to follow you on terms of blocking the Russian TV channels. Switzerland doesn't, for example. I think there are others. Are you in contact with them on this? Will they change their minds? Thank you.
Pour la première question,
on your first question, well, I'm not really going to go into detail on the origins of Brexit, but I think everybody was able to assess, first of all, the fact that there was a small, very small majority that voted for Brexit in the British population. We all remember it well. And I think everybody also noted afterwards the role of some entities that I won't mention by name here and now, but some entities that targeted a number of users, firstly in an illegal way, and secondly, with the use of disinformation, which might have contributed to forming of opinions. And to respond to your question in a bit of a broader way, we noted there are research centres working on data analysis. We noted that Russia Today and Sputnik, that had a very low number of users I'll talk about France, not Switzerland or the UK, but there was a very low number of users, hundreds, for these channels, but they occupied more than 30% of the bandwidth available on Facebook. And that was more than all of the other French channels together. And that's because of the algorithm. Because the algorithm was pushing towards this disruptive fake news and the dissemination of it. So you can see there why we have to be so attentive and why now with the DSA it will no longer be possible. That's my answer. Thank you.
Yes, on Switzerland and the sanctions, I had a very good debate with the President Cassis a month ago, and I said to him that we very much appreciate that Switzerland has joined us in most of the sanctions, especially in the financial sector. I conveyed the message that we very much appreciate that Switzerland, which is valuing so much its neutrality, is now working shoulder by shoulder with the European Union. On the sanctions in the field of media, I explain the rationale and the justification of imposing some such sanctions, which we see serious reasons and why the reasons why we decided so. So it was maybe a try to inspire and explain, but of course it's fully up to Switzerland to choose which sanctions to go for.
Thank you. Next question is for Yun Chi from Reuters, please.
I was wondering, would you advise Apple to sign up to the code of practice? Thank you.
Well, first, as I said, Yuchi, we are a democracy. So we don't force anyone, especially when it's on a voluntary basis. I mean, when it's mandatory, they know the rules and they have to follow the rules. But this is, of course, a voluntary exercise. So they do what they want to do. So if they don't want to sign, they don't want to sign. By the way, I'm very happy that I know that Apple didn't want to have not our command charger. They didn't want. They didn't sign for the command charger. But finally, we regulate, and now they will do it. That's my answer, Richie.
I will be shorter. The more, the better. And it's part of our work, which will come next now, that we will, I think, try to softly convince the new signatories to come. Indeed, we are in democracy. We do not have the plan to force anyone, but I would like everyone to see that this code of practice is a practical tool and useful for everyone who can influence the situation.
But it's good that we have, like in any classroom, good students.
Okay. Mark Scott from Politico has a question.
Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you for taking the question. Just a couple one, maybe for Vice President Jourová. At the beginning of your introductory remarks, you mentioned Russian disinformation, and the Commission and the European Union have taken some pretty extensive steps post the February invasion in terms of sanctions. Do you think, given the European Union's stance on disinformation, particularly state-backed disinformation, a voluntary or co-regulatory model is the way to go? And second, you've both mentioned Brexit, and I think the Vice President mentioned the January 6th riots as examples of the impact of disinformation. Both of those events included the promotion of disinformation or falsehoods by elected officials. And so what role do you think the code can play in terms of politically elected officials and how they spread misinformation and disinformation? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question about the fact that the code is the voluntary mechanism. We needed to distinguish the the illegal content and harmful content, which is disinformation, and we didn't want to set in stone and to put into the Digital Services Act the strict rules against disinformation, because it might easily get to the slippery slope leading to some kind of censorship. That's why we came with this code. But the beauty and the purpose of this code is to invite more and more signatories and more entities and individuals to help, because we believe that the fight against disinformation has to have this parameter of bottom-up approach. And I would like us to notice the difference between what we are doing through the code and who are we? Yeah, the Commission initiated it, we gave the guidelines, we were somehow helping to facilitate the uneasy process, but this is the product of the signatories at the end. And just notice the difference. President Putin sets in the society the tone, or decides what is the truth. And everybody who deviates from this can go to prison for 15 years. Compare the systems. We are not saying what is the truth. We just want the society to have better tool to differentiate and to work with better facts. On Brexit, I will leave this to Thierry, but just one comment from me. We used to live in maybe better times when obvious lying was a clearly disqualifying behavior for the politician. Maybe we should come back to that.
No, just, Scott, a few words to add versus what Vera said. A significant commitment in this code will become mandatory, by the way, in the DSA. And that's really something. That's why I say it's a good path towards what will be mandatory for big platforms beginning next year. And especially the one related to the obligation of transparency, which is, of course, the key subject that you are addressing here, including, for example, the obligation to know the parameters of targeting. And you know, why do I receive this information? Why it's me? Why I am targeted? Why Cambridge Analytica decided to send me this information? So it will be an obligation, and also in parallel, as I said, demonetization will be a big part of it. And finally, the monitoring will be extremely efficient, thanks, of course, to the legal obligation embedded into the DSA. So that's again a pass.
Thank you very much. This brings us to the end of our press conference. Thank you very much, Vice President. Thank you, Commissioner. Thanks to the technicians and interpreters. And thank you all for your questions and your interest. Once again, refer to our press package, IP memo, and fact sheet published online. Have a nice afternoon.